Welcome to Corporate Board Members Informational Webcast. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and today we're going to look at the topic of building effective boards with diverse candidates. And I'm happy to have a great guest with me today that has some experience in this area. Let me introduce Victor Arias, who's the Senior Client Partner for KornFerry International. And Victor, welcome to the webcast.
Thank you, TK. I appreciate being here.
My perception in this board diversity space is that we are really in the midst, and I say the country is in the midst of social change. If you look at people's markets and their customer base, it's a very diverse customer base. What has not kept pace is that social change in either the C-suite and certainly not in the boardroom. That change, though, you'd have to say is inevitable. I mean, it's going to come. So what's the difference in your mind between companies that understand that and sort of embrace that and are taking advantage of it versus those companies that are not and really run the risk of, the regulators or even Congress sort of regulating, some kind of diversity?
Sure. No, I tend to agree with you, but as you know, it's really difficult to mandate social change in corporate America. But it's hard for corporate America not to notice all the changes you mentioned. I mean, look, we've elected our first, president of color. We broke the color barrier there. In the next 25 years, we'll have a country that's minority. The younger generation, in my mind, is very colorblind. A lot of that has to do with the way they communicate, and they're very keen to social issues and issues about the environment. And it's clear that the Hispanic and the Asian demographics will continue to provide growth for this country as it relates to workers and just to the general population. So, corporate America is taking notice of this. However, the economy, the economic recession we've been through really put a damper on how to really focus on that. But as they're coming out, they're having to build a business case because they're looking for opportunities to grow their business. The impending war for talent, the fact that we have to educate our workforce, the fact that most companies really need to look for insights into those consumer bases. It's clear that companies are looking to reflect those changes at the very top. And so that's going to happen whether it's mandated or not. And I think you're starting to see a lot of that already.
Well, Victor, you're in a very unique situation when we talk about discussing boards, because not only do you place people on boards as part of your day job, but you also serve on a public board. And I'm reasonably sure that you didn't place yourself on a board. So I think the audience would find it interesting if you could talk about how that occurred in getting on a board, and then subsequently what the interview process was like. Okay.
No, thank you. And as I might have mentioned before, if I were actually placing myself, I'd probably be on more boards than just one. But my experience is really not unlike many others. One of the differences that there was not a search firm involved. It was really around personal relationships. And even though firms do use search firms, that's probably only half the time now. The other half is still done the old-fashioned way, and people that really know and trust you. And that was my case. I had been serving on the Stanford Board of Trustees, had a personal relationship with one of the other members, and which also states the fact that serving on those kind of nonprofits is a huge platform, and I encourage a lot of other folks to really look at that. But this private equity-backed company needed somebody, an independent director, and so they had done their gap analysis in terms of what they needed. And so I fit a few of those gaps that they have. I had independence. Clearly, they wanted somebody that understood more about talent management and sort of executive compensation. And then they actually had a special need for understanding the Hispanic market, because that was going to continue to be a big part of their growth in the future. So the process was that I was contacted by these board members. I had an interview with them, and that will happen right off the bat. Usually it's somebody from NomGov, Nominations and Governance. Kind of passed that test, and then was asked to speak with the CEO, and spent a good 2 hours dinner with the CEO for whom it's really important to work well with the board. And so spend time with him, spend time with the CFO. And I was going through my own due diligence. I mean, I really wanted to understand the motivations of the management. I wanted to know my potential future colleagues on the board. And I also wanted to find out more about the financial health of that company. And so I went through this process, and all in all, it probably took about 3 to 4 months before I was elected. And so I think that's a pretty normal process. Now, the time can be a little different, the time frame. But, you know, the takeaway is, look, you know, looking for independence, want to make sure that you bring something to the table and that it's required right now. And that there's a lot of good chemistry between the nominations governance people, the CEO, and your fellow colleagues.
Search firms often find themselves in a very interesting situation as it relates to diversity, because even though you may be huge proponents, and I know I'm certainly familiar myself, having worked with the Hispanic community and Carlos Orta's group, that KornFerry has been involved in that process. But when you look at the situation of how a search firm is challenged, you can't go in and say you need to look for a diverse candidate. You're a service firm. They're going to tell you what candidates they're interested in doing. Now, they may have engaged you in this analysis, whatever, but in the end, it's KornFerry's job to meet the needs of their client. So knowing that you guys do want to push this, talk about the delicate discussions relative to suggesting that boards become more diverse.
Sure. That's a really good question. But first, let me just thank you for the recognition of our work with the Hispanic community, but also with the African American and the women groups. And we actually just kicked off a comprehensive global diversity and inclusion initiative this week. So we're very committed to this. But so how do you expand client horizons, really? And it's a delicate situation. I mean, at the end of the day, the client does decide where they want to go and what their needs are. And as consultants, we should be advising them not only on what they think they need, but also on what they're paying for. And that's paying for our advice and what we think will help them be better. And so that requires a tremendous amount of trust. And that's where the delicacy gets balanced. Is if you have a good level of trust with the client, then you can have those kind of discussions. You know, clients will usually listen. It may not be up front and at the beginning, but over time they're going to listen to good advice, and I think they will act over time. But it is a question of educating clients. And to educate clients, you need two things. You need really good data so that they have common language and understanding. But two, you really need to build a business case. Because if you don't build a business case, going back to the first question about mandating change, it's not going to happen.
Well, I had the benefit of attending the Society of Corporate Secretaries annual conference, and Ralph Whitworth, who is one of the heads of the relational investors and a well-known activist, during his keynote remarks, he talked about that at some of his companies where he has served as a board, when there was already 5 sitting CEOs that were members of the board, that he would propose that their next candidate, A, not be a CEO, and B, not have any previous experience. And his theory was the board made up of these CEOs and himself would be great mentors to create a new good board member. Now, that obviously struck a great chord with anybody that was a pro-diverse board candidate, but there's no question that would increase the pool, but I don't think we're likely to see that happen anytime soon.
I think Ralph has a really good point. You know, the reality is that we've experienced one of the toughest recessions in history. And during that time, companies were thinking more about survival. And so they really looked specifically for that CEO experience, whether it was sitting CEO or prior, to kind of help them get through these troubled waters. And they also kept a lot of seasoned board members on board. They kept extending mandatory retirement age so they wouldn't have to get them off. But I think as this economy recovers, and I think we are past the worst of it, most companies are really preparing for life after this recession. And so that means they're looking for growth. They're looking on where to invest. They're looking at global markets, but they're also looking at niche markets, particularly here in the Americas. So that means I think there will be board seats that will turn over. And so companies really need to look at those gaps for those places that they want to grow. And that means that there's an opportunity here to really change the way that boards look. And so I think you'll see, heads of HR, chief people officers, GMs of other significant businesses, not necessarily CEOs, chief marketing officers, any kind of executive that's been through a high level of complexity in business dealings is going to be really valuable. Global and international type experience. I think those are the kind of gaps that companies are going to look for. And I think that really speaks to how you expand the pool of talent. And that really includes lots of, candidates of color. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity. And I think we're looking at that right now.
Victor Arias, great comments, great insight from a board member and a key member of a search firm. It was a pleasure to have you with us and passing along those words of wisdom. And that will conclude this Corporate Board Member Informational webcast. We hope you'll join us again where we take another look at a great topic that will help you be a better director. So we'll see you then.